braving the weather and coming out to our gun violence discussion tonight. Actually, tonight's panel discussion is not a referendum on the Second Amendment. It is, however, on the impact of America's gun violence epidemic. It is not about taking away Second Amendment rights, but it is about putting innocent lives first. I want to start by thanking Councilman Matt Hirsch for working very hard with us on this. It's an important issue to both of us. I also want to thank all our panelists whom I will ask to introduce themselves to you. And I want to start with a couple of facts. On average, 96 Americans are killed by gun violence every day. 7 children and teens are killed with guns in the U.S. on an average day. 50 women are shot to death by intimate partners in an average month. Background checks have blocked over 3 million gun sales to prohibited people. Black men are 13 times more likely to be killed by gun violence than white men. And according to the Washington Post, as of March 2018, 187,000 students have been exposed to gun violence since Columbine. This means that the number of children who have been shaken by gunfire in these places go to learn that 187,000 people, children, exposed to gun violence is a higher number than the entire population of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and Eugene, Oregon. At this point, I'm going to ask our panelists, who represent elected officials, school officials, students, and the NAACP, and also Million Moms March Brady Bill member and president of the Middlesex County chapter.
I just wanted to add very quickly that we're dealing with a whole new political reality, which is why we focus on the table so important tonight. We all have our personal points of reference, and when I was in middle school and high school, I think all of us were, we didn't have to deal with the reality of unexpected gunfire, of an unexpected gun attack in our school. Obviously, there are so many communities where guns are prevalent outside of school, but the fact that this is a current reality, one that was never one for us, what the students are dealing with now, is particularly pressing, and that's why we feel so important to have a discussion of the policies that are on the table, and particularly the mental health component as well, as students are dealing with this. So parents, can look to their children and see, and know what to look for, and know to see if there are signs of stress taking place and what to do. So that's I think that having these discussions now, particularly when these are just entirely new realities, are particularly urgent. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And at this point, what I'd like to do is start at this end of the table. If you would just introduce yourself, and then after introductions, we'll go around the table again, and so you can each say a few words, after which any of you can feel free to ask a question. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I am Sandy Narr, and I'm one of the Middlesex County freeholders. And in terms of input in this discussion, we just recently had a roundtable within the county with members from the different vocational schools, the college, and the sheriff's office, and all the other players to deal with issues about how we're going to make sure that all of our students in the county system are safe and feel comfortable in their educational environments, as well as our teachers and our staff. I also have a slightly unique perspective of this situation because I'm also a public defender in Manhattan. So I see all of this from two different sides. So, but I'm interested to hear what everyone else has to say.
My name is Kim Crane. Good evening. I'm the student and staff support person at Bartle School in Highland Park, formerly an art teacher for 17 years. I'm also the vice president and past president of the Highland Park Education Association, Teachers Union. And we've been having many discussions in our schools with our administrators and with our members about what we're going to do moving forward.
I mean, I really, Pat Doggin, I'm your state senator. I really can't, you know, I'm a lawyer. There's an expression, law, res ipsa loquitur, the facts speak for themselves. The statistics that the mayor just went through, any rational, reflective, moral human being would say, enough already. And I'm happy to say that on the state of New Jersey, we now have a new governor. As you probably know, our prior governor vetoed any attempt we made to gun control. Governor Murphy is embracing it, supporting it. The group of bills have already passed the Assembly, about to pass the Senate. So we're going to do it right here in New Jersey. And I know the governor is also working with New York and Pennsylvania and Connecticut to do a gun safety zone for the northeast portion of the United States. But the thing I'm most proud of is this guy here to my left, our Congressman Frank Pallone. This battle for years, and we are just so fortunate to have him representing us. So fortunate.
I'm not going to say anything after that. Thank you, Pat. Let me thank the mayor and councilman for putting this together. Highland Park is always out front on all issues, particularly progressive issues that need to be addressed locally, statewide, countywide, and federally. But following up on what Senator Doggin said, though, of course it's true that New Jersey has pretty good gun safety laws in effect, and as he mentioned, the governor and the legislature now are even going further, which I think is important. But the problem is that because there is no national legislation on some of the key issues that we face, that guns continue to come into New Jersey from other states, and that's why we need federal laws. And I always talk about three basic things. I mean, we can talk about whatever you like tonight, but the three basic things are, number one, universal background checks, because there's so many loopholes when people buy guns either on the internet or at a gun show, for example, and they don't have to have the criminal background check. Second thing is the ban on assault weapons. We had it when I was first in Congress. I think it expired in something like 1994 when the Republican majority under Newt Gingrich took over, and they let it expire. We need that. And then the third thing I often mention is a limitation on the number of rounds of ammunition clips, because these mass murderers, obviously, use automatic weapons and numerous rounds of ammunition and kill so many people. But I do want to say that we shouldn't just look at this as an issue with these large mass murderers or mass murderings that take place and get all the attention. In fact, we have people killed through gun violence every day, and in a lot of our towns on an individual basis. Just about a week or 10 days after Parkland, we had a 10-year-old in Asbury Park, which I also represent. I represent most of Middlesex and Monmouth counties. We had a 10-year-old in Asbury Park who was a victim of a shooting. He wasn't the target, but he was in the middle of it. So we have to look at it in that respect, not just in terms of mass killings. I will say this, and that is in the aftermath of Parkland, I think the mayor hinted at it. I do think things are different. I think that because of the fact that the students at Parkland began to speak out, go to Washington, go around the country, start these the marches and the rallies with students in different parts of the country, including here in our 6th congressional district, that many of those in Congress who were opposed to any gun safety legislation because of the NRA are now not at the point where we're having a vote on it, but at least they're scared that we're not having a vote on it. The problem in the House, of course, and the Senate, but I speak for the House, is that the NRA is so powerful over mostly Republicans, some Democrats, and the Republican leadership won't bring up a vote on any of the things I mentioned because of the NRA. But I do think the power of the NRA is breaking down, and that the students in Parkland and around the country are really making a difference. Will we have a vote on this year? No, because Speaker Ryan, I don't know if he's the Speaker, but whoever it is in charge of the Republican majority, they won't bring up a vote. But, you know, we'll see what happens in the next session of Congress. In any case, the grassroots movement to say that we must take action and we should take action now is growing. And I really want to emphasize how important that is and will be ultimately. Because, you know, the three things I mentioned, 80–90%, depending on which one of the public are in favor of. The majority NRA members are in favor of it. But we still have that sort of problem with bringing the legislation up because of the NRA's influence over the Republicans primarily. So I just want to, I don't want to discourage you. I think it's really important that you continue to speak out because that is going to make a difference ultimately, and maybe not too far in the future. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Got most of the folks of my neighbors here. My name is Bruce Morgan, and I'm the president of the New Brunswick Area Branch NAACP. I'm also the second vice president for the state conference of NAACP. And I am very happy to be here talking about this situation tonight because I'll say that, you know, people are getting antsy and we're really ready to push our representatives that are fighting against us to do something about gun violence. It's been, in my lifetime, I think it's very sad that, you know, it's taking children in schools to really bring this this issue to the forefront. Because gun violence has been a problem for many, many, many years. When my children were young, they tried to ask me about friends I knew that got killed from gun violence. And off the top of my head, I came up with 35 in my lifetime. And you know, it's ridiculous that through my course of life, I could just right off the top of my head come up with this number. So I'm glad to see that with the people of the United States finally rising up against these gun manufacturers, because the NRA is their, for all intents and purposes, I call it their pack. But if you look at it, it's been recently that actually the NRA became that. Because up to maybe 25, 30 years ago, there was gun safety and gun instruction. But then when the manufacturers got involved, started passing money around, and they started basically buying the laws to make us able to purchase these weapons. But we're here now, and with this movement coming, it's coming like a wave. You know, they can't be stopped, and we just have to keep on pushing on, and the NAACP will do all we can to support this movement and finally get some motion going to stop this tragedy that's in our country now. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm Nancy Pinkin, Assemblywoman Pinkin, and I've been working on gun issues for probably about 20 or 30 years. I was involved with the original Million Mile March, which was, I don't know how many years ago, 2000. And I worked for quite a while with the Academy of Pediatrics with Senator Weinberg on smart gun technology so that each gun would have an imprint and only the person whose fingerprints were on that gun would be able to use it. That was actually signed into law, and it was said that all gun stores would have to sell those guns, and the NRA basically put out a notice that any stores that did sell those guns, they were going to basically blackball. So that was not successful, unfortunately. We did have a child in East Brunswick, up in East Brunswick, who was killed from his best friend who had a gun from his parent. His grandfather was collecting guns, and he had guessed away. The guns were in the house, and the child shot his friend and fatally. I do agree with Bruce on the racial part of the guns. I mean, many people think it's a public health hazard. Certainly in the healthcare arena, we think of it as a public health hazard. We have many areas that are plagued by gun violence, yet we haven't been alarmed soon enough. So that's a big issue. I was always a supporter for parents to say, to ask when you send a child to another home, do they have guns in the home, and not to send your child if that's the case. I certainly think that people should, take every precaution. If you have a gun, have a safe, lock it up, teach the children never to touch one, because you don't know where they're going to be. They could be on the street somewhere, they could find a gun. And you just want to make sure that that doesn't happen. I certainly advocate for, not taking money from the NRA and finding out if you're dealing with people who are. We should ask people to take a pledge not to take money from the NRA. That's something I was thinking of as I was sitting here. And certainly we should, there is a ban on research on gun violence. I'm strong, I'm against any prohibition for that research. California just passed a rule that said that they were going to start their own research, and I think we should, if we can't have that federal legislation, we're probably not going to get it now, we should set up our own efforts to do that. One thing I've been really impressed with, we keep banging our heads about the gun violence, and we have not been successful at making a difference. How can we think outside the box to be successful? And I was very impressed with the businesses that took policies that said, if they are not going to, I forget what store owns Walmart and Dick's, but they were going to start taking out their gun sales from their stores and getting businesses to put pressure on if we can if we're not successful in other ways. And that was a very novel approach, so certainly an important one. And certainly the mental health issues. I have worked for many years with mental health groups on advocacy issues, and the agencies that were working with people that were mentally ill often felt like they were the victims, not the ones that were out creating the violence. But that being said, we do have to look at the mental health issues and how we can address this. I had a policy in my own home that, like, if kids came into my house and they had, grand theft auto or they just weren't allowed to be watching those type of things. I mean, I can make my own stance, and each one of us can individually take those actions that we can be doing. And so I think those are a few things that we can do. I am very concerned and distressed, and I feel it's very unfortunate that we're at this point. We certainly need to make a big change so that no other country is facing the gun violence we have. I think the fact that the students have made this issue a priority for them, and the actions that they're taking are to be commended, and we appreciate every action they're taking, and we're here for them, obviously. Thank you.
Scott Taylor, superintendent of the school district here, and also a 23-year resident of the community, so I do welcome all of those unfamiliar faces to our beautiful, close-knit community. I have been taking advantage of the latest high-profile school shooting to work the media, TV, newspaper, and peer-reviewed publications to be a counter voice to those, many actually, of those of my peers who have taken a knee-jerk reaction to the latest school shooting by installing armed security guards in their schools, or security cameras, doing whatever they can to take what I consider in some cases to be extreme measures to lock down schools, almost militarize them in order to protect children. My angle has been to promote school-student connectedness. I do 3 things that I can talk ad nauseam about, but I won't do right now. But in sum, 1, help adults identify their hidden biases that can verge to microaggression with students that doesn't do anything to help the student-school connection. 2, focus as much as possible on social emotional learning. Teach kids how to make better decisions, how to promote interpersonal relationships with one another. And 3, and I think this is probably most important, especially as it relates to the parkland that shift away from a discipline, shift to discipline approach and more to a restorative practices, community building mindset when working with students who are acting out. You do those three things, among some other things, and you're going to bring kids closer to their schools, and I think eventually help to prevent some of the violence that we're encountering. So, I mean, self-serving in the when it comes to the gun control, gun violence debate, by turning it into a discussion about school-student connections. Sign me up. You're already here as a resident, so you're signed.
So I'm Dr. Jeffrey Axelbank. I'm a psychologist here in town, here in Highland Park. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm not going to say much now. I want to hear the questions from all of you. I feel like my role on this panel is to bring the mental health sensibility and also the research facts to the issue, and I'll be trying to be careful as I'm talking to make a distinction between when I'm expressing my opinion versus when I'm reporting on the data.
Hi. It's my teacher voice. My name is Karen Cantor, and I'm the coordinator for the Middlesex County chapter of the Freedom Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, Million Mile March. It's a mouthful, but we were two organizations that combined to work together. Sadly, there have been a lot of organizations that have popped up over the recent years because of this epidemic that we're having. We're not the only ones. Brady, Million Mile March, there's Giffords, there's Newtown. I mean, there are all these groups. Isn't this outrageous that there are all these grassroots organizations that have had to pop up because of this epidemic? It's ridiculous. What I can say is that we need people to be on board with us. We need people to reach out to. Highland Park has been a great community in terms of advancing awareness of the problem. It's been mentioned that in terms of parents talking to other parents to find out whether there are guns in the home and what to do in this situation. That's part of our ASK program. We have a Speak Up program. Brady has a Speak Up program in terms of making sure that students speak up if they are, you know, thinking that somebody is carrying or that something is going on. We are very fortunate to have the legislators that we have. We are very fortunate. But there are other people, and one of the things that I do when I get people's email addresses is I tell them, for example, tomorrow there are 6 bills that were just passed in the Assembly, very important bills having to do, one of the things that hasn't been mentioned, many good things have been mentioned, is something called the Air Code bill, and that's Extreme Risk Prevention Order. And that was the bill that really could have saved the lives of the Parkland victims. Nicholas Cruz, who was the perpetrator of that horrible tragedy, was known to have problems. And he was also known to have guns. And the family that was holding on to him did report him to the police. And they did know what was, what the problem was. But they could not legally take his guns. This bill, which I believe has been passed now in Florida a little late, is something that we're proposing now that's been passed in the Assembly. And tomorrow we're going to go down, and now it's looking to be passed in the Senate. And it looks like hopefully it will be passed in the Senate and can be made law in New Jersey. There are 5 other bills. But we are working. There are so many things that need to be done in terms of gun legislation. There are so many things that need to be done, and people need to be aware of what's going on. We need people on the ground. Students have been amazing, and Their energy is energizing for me, but we need all of us to be working to do this together. It can't just be the students. They're doing enough. They're applying for college, you know. But we really need to be part of the action to stem this epidemic.
So my name is Gayle Brill Mittler. I'm a junior at Highland Park High School here in Highland Park. I'm speaking, I guess, for students and those who participated in the recent walkout in March to protest gun violence, especially in regards to the recent apartment shooting. As many other schools have done, you may have known, it's been sort of a national movement. The Columbine massacre is coming up April 20th. And there's also been several other dates, such as one in March, where students have been mobilizing. So speaking for the delegation in Highland Park, we've been pretty concerned about, especially as this affects a lot of students, and many fall victim and many have become the perpetrators, as I think Mr. Ashland would probably attest. I think mental health is, and a lot of us think that it's a big part of this, and while many people would say that it's up to the students to report those of us who are mentally ill or receiving off, I think it's also, we should be focusing on other administrative approaches to do so. But we're also very invested in working to solve the problem of the roots, which is actual gun access in this country. We've fallen really far behind compared to other developed countries in the world, in the international community. The United States, it has one of the most lax gun laws in the federal setting, at least compared to Australia and countries in the EU. So we've also been, many of the students that I speak for are targeting the NRA, especially congresswomen and women who accept money from the NRA. I think as this new generation grows and becomes constituents and becomes voters, we're sort of working and hoping that we can create a norm of not taking money from these types of organizations to make it seem shameful to see something that you shouldn't do. We're trying to increase awareness about who takes money from the NRA, because these kinds of things should be made public. And I definitely, our representatives here have been great when it comes to gun control. I think of all the grades as a student, I would not like to have an F grade, but for Pallone, I think you can be proud of having an F from the NRA. I think that's so yeah, I think that's about it.
If anybody has a question, you just queue up by the microphone and direct the question to whomever you would like. Questions?
I think I have a word on it.
Sheila?
Yeah, I think I have a word on it. It's a support issue.
Hello, I'm Sheila Highsmith, resident of Highland Park, former chair of the Human Relations Commission. I just wanted to commend this young lady for her insightfulness. I'm a freelance journalist, but most importantly, I work for the Department of Health, which was Department of Human Services. I'm a forensic psychiatric social worker, and I work throughout the state, dealing with nursing homes, the prison system, and her insightfulness. And to you, Doctor, I hope the war now on drugs is not a diversion from the gun violence, but I feel as though there's some connectedness with that, particularly with our young people. So how do you feel about that?
I think really the issue is access to care. That because maybe this is trying to bring up a concern that I have about one of the bills in the package in the Assembly 1181, which would require mental health professionals to report to the police any patient who has a risk of harm to themselves or others, and then the police is supposed to investigate whether that person has done or not. And I have a problem with that because that's going to limit people's willingness to get care, and it's going to have a very limited impact because people with mental illness are not the people who are committing violence. So I'd rather see the legislature work to increase access to care, both for substance abuse issues and for mental health issues. We also know that, as has been said, that the vast majority of gun violence is small numbers of shootings. You know, the mass shootings only represent less than 1% over the past 15 years, and so the smaller crime instances, the ones that are 180 every day, those are the ones that are most likely to be impacted if we increase access to care.
My understanding of 1181 is that the need to requirement that the police be notified is that if there is a direct threat that is made, that the clinician hears, it's not like, oh, I feel like going out, but it would be, I'm gonna go, I want to go, I broke up with my girlfriend, I have a gun, and that's how that would be, that's how it would.
Yes, my understanding is that we already have to do that. So I'm not sure whether
there are options. You don't have to talk about the specifics about, offline.
Can I just, what the doctor just brought up though is something, because in my line of work, as a criminal defense attorney in New York, what I have found disturbing since Parkland and all the mass shootings is the immediate attention paid to mental health issues. Which I just think is a great way that the NRA is packaging this to divert attention to what the real issues are. Because for the vast majority of the cases that I deal with, and I'm on the defense side, very few of my clients who have mental health issues, a lot of my clients do have guns, have had access to guns. And so, to me, the bigger issue is what kind of guns people have access to, magazines, everything else. And while I'm more than happy for anybody in this country to pay attention to the mental health issues that are woefully lacking in funding and research and attention, I think that this merging of the two issues is really a distraction. And so I would really hope that everybody starts to realize that it's a way, I think, of vilifying people with mental health issues in a really negative way, backwards way. And quite frankly, somebody mentioned before, when the students about the other countries, we're not the only country that has mental health issues. Obviously, there are people all over the world, so when you just logically sit there and you realize that argument is kind of specious. We are the country that has the most lax gun laws, which I think then can connect up in some really horrific ways on occasion. So,
Santi is absolutely right in terms of the the message that, the NRA and the Republican leadership tries to give every time we have, one of these mass shootings. They keep talking about mental health. And that doesn't mean we don't need treatment. We don't need their access to treatment. In fact, the spending bill that we passed a few weeks ago, which was bipartisan, really overturned a lot of the recommendations by the Trump administration because they didn't have the votes in the House to pass these draconian cuts. So we actually do have some major increasing in funding for treatment. And as far as opiates, we have there's $3 billion for this year of grants that can, go back to states for various things. But it is true. I mean, you're right. Every time, they would characterize, the right would characterize, and the NRA would characterize the whole problem as one of mental health and not about safety. So you do have to be extremely careful that you don't fall into that trap. It's very true.
Did anybody see the veterans? It's a thing on Facebook that was put out by veterans against assault weapons. Like a month ago. It's really, really.
How recently?
I definitely like to agree with the previous speaker. That's definitely an issue that many students are passionate about. That mental health, while is key to this issue, is one of the most notorious ways the NRA has diverted attention away and diverted blame from them. When you really think about the ways you address an issue, especially with legislation, you can kind of approach it by either addressing the issue or addressing the effects of the issue. And while both need to happen, you should both target people who already own guns, people with mental health issues that own guns. You can't actually make substantive change if you don't address the issue at its roots, which is access to guns in this country. People with mental health are not the ones creating this issue. They're not the ones that cause this issue at the roots. It is access to guns. And those two things shouldn't really be mixed up. And I would definitely agree with that one.
As an educator, I would agree as well. Full disclosure, I'm an NRA member from Pennsylvania. And completely agree, showing my age, but many, many years ago in Pennsylvania, we grew up as hunters. First day of Joe was the day out of school, it was in the calendar. I didn't grow up in the 1970s and 80s with semi-automatic weapons. The NRA was an organization that helped and assisted gun safety and promoting the enjoyment of the sport. Something that we consider very American, to go out and, kill your food. I mean, I know that's not great for some people to hear, but that's the culture that I came from. The culture of semi-automatic weapons becoming popular and something that you would aspire to have or use is relatively new. When I grew up, that was something that my mother would let me go near. That was a different kind of, you just didn't see it. You just didn't see it. So bringing us to where we are now, there is really, as a gun owner, as a gun user, as a person who grew up with weapons for sport, this is something that is completely out of the realm of what many NRA members and people who in this country are familiar with weapons we're baffled, absolutely baffled that we need to have semi-automatic weapons for access to them. And for the collectors, there's a way to collect. Keep them in range, keep them somewhere else, don't keep them in your homes. So the language that we use, if you want to stop school shootings, I think there's two different issues with gun violence. There's gun violence in the home, there's gun violence in schools. And when you have a weapon of mass destruction, really, that can take out enormous number of people, the children, at one time. And we had a presentation by a school officer of the police department, and he said the attacks take about 30 seconds. Feels like hours, but it's 30 seconds. He said police are there within minutes. 30 seconds with that many people. It's just boggling. Access needs to be denied. Then we can work on mental health as a double prong issue. Dr. Taylor talking about restorative practice. It's amazing that we can start there. We absolutely need those programs in our schools to build empathy, to build connections, to show students that they're supported. We're with them 7 hours out of the day or more, many times more. Sometimes it's 9 if they're after school or before school. Kids come to my office, and these are the kids that you would think are bad kids. There's no bad kids. There's just bad choices. And they crave that they want to have lunch with me. I suspended them yesterday, but they want to have lunch with me the next day because they need that. They need that attention. They need to know that they have a connection. You're not going to reach 100% of the population, but for that small percent that you can't reach after doing everything you can, let's not hammer it out.
Our students are very lucky to have you as a teacher.
I'm lucky to have them.
I think it's a weird an app where they can find other kids to sit with at lunchtime, that they would identify, somebody that which I thought was a really, really nice thing to do. Not just for guns, but just in general.
I actually speak about that for a second. So, I know there's a lot of sentiment about that students, the general student body should be more in tune to each other's mental health issues. And I know this kind of goes along with wanting to kind of a anti-technology and increased social awareness and activity approach, but I don't think targeting students or young people as in general is as effective because it's in a way it's almost victim blaming, and in general you can't really target the victims, the people who are affected by this violence for this, and I know that's not what you were trying to do, and it isn't, but it kind of goes along with that tangent. And because I know a lot of people have the opinion that this is solely mental health, and students should be working harder to make friends with each other and sit closer to each other at lunch and meet new people, which is good in general, but it's also not really what we need to be focusing on here. It's you kind of get what I'm saying. I mean, it's kind of it's not really about telling people who to make friends with. If you're trying to, in a sense, what you're really doing is you're saying make friends because this could be the next shooter, which doesn't really seem as effective. I mean, we should be doing the common sense thing and targeting actual access to guns, which I know you're doing, which I know is and I commend you for doing that, but that kind of sentiment is what the NRA and what these type of organizations would love for you to buy into.
It's just one little thing, but but your point is well taken.
Congressman Pallone, I know you were trying to get in there to say something.
No, I just said we should probably hear more from the audience.
Can you say something? You're saying you're a student.
I actually have a question. I said, I'm Dr. Gayle Brill. I'm a psychologist who's worked in the forensic field for over 20 years. I've worked in juvenile justice prisons. I've worked in psychiatric hospitals, in forensic units, the bio units of people who are felons. convicted. And so I've seen a lot. And it's not about targeting the people who have mental health issues. In recent shootings, family members have called. Kids have said. These are no surprises. But what I do want to say is I want to listen to you, because your generation is to make what we're not. You know, we're memories. That's what we do. We're memories. You are standing up, you have the energy to be on the and we can work for you. You just have to tell us what to do. That was hard on me, but you need to do this. I personally need you to do it. Tell me what to do, where to go, when to be there. Because you're in it. You're in it. You know who's facing this plan. You know who's witnessing this. So that's my comment statement. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. I was fortunate to attend a panel discussion at the Rutgers School of Social Work last week. Karen was on the panel as well, with Governor Florio. And one thing I found interesting, I guess Congressman Pallone, this is directed toward you. One of the most interesting things that I got out of that panel, as far as something that I didn't know, and you alluded to this, was he recalled his first congressional campaign in 1974, in his first district, South Jersey, kind of rural and urban and rural district, that he was endorsed by the NRA as a Democrat. And it was because the focus then was on land conservation issues. The NRA was focused on preserving land in order to provide spaces for people to hunt as a sport. When did that change? And, I guess, it was a long time coming, but I guess, what were some of the milestones in the sea change of the role of the NRA and the interpretation of the Second Amendment and their role in that? And from a political standpoint, I guess this is for the electives, from a political standpoint, what we're seeing now as far as really a sea change in political pressure in ways that we haven't seen in it's my memory when it comes to gun control and gun safety. How does that push back against the institutional change that the NRA has succeeded doing over 30, 40 years?
I don't know, the history or the details of the NRA, but I will say this because you mentioned the Second Amendment, and maybe you can comment on it. I know people, I know a few people who were, NRA members who basically say the same thing that Kim says, But what I have noticed over the last, I've been in Congress will be 30 years in November, I usually admit it. What I have noticed is this preoccupation with the Second Amendment. In other words, I definitely talk to NRA members who voted for me, believe it or not. And will say, I agree with you on your 3 points. Universal background checks, assault weapons, limitation on the grounds of ammunition. But I'm just so afraid that what's really going on here is an effort to limit or repeal the Second Amendment. One of the NRA's goals, of course, which they succeeded in, was to have the courts, the Supreme Court rule that the Second Amendment was an individual right. Because for many years there were scholars who said that it wasn't. In other words, it was meant as a right for the militia. I don't know all the details. The idea that it was a protection of militias and not an individual right to be.
A well-regulated militia.
Well-regulated militia. The courts, so they were very successful, and the court ultimately ruled it was a split decision, the conservative court, that it was an individual right. So I thought that once that decision came down, that would be kind of their, since they succeeded in that, that would be it. They wouldn't be continuing to focus on the Second Amendment. But oftentimes when you go to meetings like this, and I've had a lot, town meetings, a lot of meetings with the student groups at high schools and middle schools. Some of them will get up, particularly the students, and say, well, we need to abolish the Second Amendment. We need to repeal the Second Amendment. And I'm like, no, that's not what we're trying to do here. Because the courts have clearly ruled, including the Supreme Court, that you can have reasonable common sense restrictions, if you will, with regard to guns. And that doesn't violate the Second Amendment. Just recently, I think in Massachusetts, there was a test case, I think it was actually brought by the Henry, where the, I guess it's this, I don't know, the circuit court or something, ruled that was not, that banning assault weapons in Massachusetts was not a infringement on the Second Amendment. So, yeah, and the case I think that was brought that where the individual that was upheld or interpreted was one in the District of Columbia where they were banning handguns, right? So that's your spectrum, right? You can't outright ban handguns because that would violate the Second Amendment. On the other hand, common sense restriction, even assault weapons ban, which actually is a restriction on whole types of weapons, right? So I can't imagine that the court would say that a criminal background check would be a violation of the Second Amendment or a limitation on the number of clips, So I do think that in talking to NRA, people who are gun owners and hunters, have handguns in their homes for protection, you've got to constantly remind them that we're not out to repeal the Second Amendment or the right to bear arms, individually. So I don't know. I mean, this is one of the things that the NRA does very effectively. They convince gun owners that if they allow any of the gun safety measures that I talked about, or anything at all, that this is going to, like a domino effect, that's ultimately going to take away their rifle or take away their handgun. You've got to be mindful of that. I don't know if that answers your question, but I try. It's hard because I try not to use the term gun control. I use the term gun safety. Sometimes I slip. Most of the time I say gun safety, because if you say gun control, that's the type of thing that clicks in the mind of the hunter or the handgun owner. Oh, you want to take away my gun. So we just have to be careful with our language. We've got to be careful that we say we're not trying to abolish the Second Amendment. We're not trying to be Japan, or I don't know, I went to Japan and my son's there teaching English, and he said, oh, they don't have any, they don't have a Second Amendment. Japan, you can't own a gun. So you've got to be careful, I think, that you don't go that way. It's wrong to believe it, because that's not helping our cause, and it plays right into the NRA. I don't know if that answers your question. You made me think about all this.
I was just wondering when.
I don't know.
What's really interesting, because I think what you're saying is right, that the Second Amendment can be read and had been read as a fairly common sense approach to gun ownership and gun rights. And at some point, 30 years ago, the NRA started to take a more extreme stance where it said that any regulation on guns was an assault on the Second Amendment and infringement on one's gun rights. And that to me seems, in the very long term, counterintuitive to their cause, as I think our members are saying. And as you noted, 89% of the public supports gun safety. So that there is a point where you arrive at critical mass where, while there's this bulwark in the Congress that is resistant to gun control because of outside influence, there does seem to be a point where there needs to be kind of a perceived back and say, hey, look, this is really where and what the Second Amendment is and what it does.
This is a very recent phenomenon.
When popular culture, because remember there's a connection between sales and the NRA. And when popular culture became, in the late 80s, early 90s, when I say late 80s, when popular culture turned to much more exposure of movies like, Die Hard. Listen, I'm all for an artist. I'm all for expression and freedom of speech and all that. So I'm not, bashing where art culture went. It's just an observation on the timeline of when it happened. So when you have popular culture exposing and making, setting out automatic weapons, anything beyond hunting, which was pretty much a staple in maybe not New Jersey, but in most of the country. Hunting was just something you did. It wasn't something you did because you were cool. It was just something you did. In the late 80s, guns became cool. We had Rambo. We had, then we had video games and my husband plays video games. He's the least violent person I know. A video game doesn't make someone a killer, but it does show an enormous amount of exposure to what's out there and a predisposition to, this is something that maybe I'll become a collector. So with the widespread cultural shift, then the sales of that type of weapon became more popular, and the NRA is very connected with gun manufacturers.
I just wanted to add, because I have a good friend of mine who does lobbying in DC. She no longer does it. But it's really interesting because where you also saw the shift was, I think, a lot of the current leadership, or maybe just recently stepped down the NRA, they started modeling a lot of what they did on the tobacco industry. Because if you remember, there was a point where, cigarette sales were just so prevalent, and they were marketing to kids, and you had Joe Camel and everything else. And that was so successful that actually there are, if you go back and read articles, there are a lot of signs that the NRA leadership started actually having meetings and really rationing up their marketing, which is not what they used to do. And so they created a campaign where they were really sitting there going, how do we reach out to non-traditional gun owners and everyone else, and how do we increase our membership? So that's part and parcel of it. And one little thing that I was hoping for is that there's an uprising within the NRA, because I have friends who are NRA members, and they say the same things that you're saying, Kim. And I'm waiting for them to create their own organization and abandon a lot of this crazy stuff. And it's going to take a while, but grassroots. And the one thing I say to you guys is that I really appreciate everything all of you guys are doing. But I think that you have to be careful about, and I used the word vilification before, but also in this area, to vilify all, gun owners, right? Because if you do that, we're going to set up 2 armed camps again, and there are a lot of responsible gun owners, and there are a lot of people who would agree on most of the things that you're saying, and you've got to find that intersection between them and you. And one of it is if I saw something where there were students out in the Midwest, and they're growing up gun owners, and they're saying, well, we're feeling pushed out by all of these other kids. We would like to work with them, but once they find out that I had guns or my parents had guns, we're the enemy. And I think sometimes they have to figure out a common ground there and sort of rise up and throw out the current NRA leadership. We need to do that.
I have a lot to say, but I'd rather hear questions.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I live here in Highland Park. I have 2 kids in the district, and my husband is a teacher also. I'm an attorney, and Senator, I appreciate your use of the term res ipsa loquitur. I've not heard that since law school, so I always appreciate that. I think unquestionably the focus has to be on gun access. But when we hear about schools in the context of all this debate, what we've heard from the federal government is more funding for militarizing schools, for bringing more security and whatnot, and I think that's absolutely the wrong approach. But what I'd like to see is for that conversation to turn, to stay on school funding, but not for that, for other services, because if you want to deal with kids who are really struggling or at risk of not so much mass shootings, but just of growing up, leaving school and turning to violence, we have to have more funding for things like social workers in school or counselors to deal with this. And of course, we're not going to hear that from the federal government or the Republicans now, but it would be nice to see that change and to have that discussion change from just the focus on safety measures in the schools, which, arming teachers, which I think is just nonsense, but providing services that are needed, not as a focus on, not to reinforce this mental illness, stigma, and connection, but because we know that violence is an everyday issue, and it's not just mass shootings, but it's kids growing up and then turning to violence, and we can do a lot more to address that in schools if we had more resources. And so much, particularly as we've seen in this debate since Parkland, too much responsibility is placed on teachers. They don't need arms, they need more support. So it would be nice, and I understand in this political atmosphere it's very difficult to do, but that's what I would like to see. I'd like to see a strong connection between gun control and school funding in a positive way that doesn't involve arming people.
Just to give you a sense of the reality on the ground, our Middle High School has a teen center staffed by 5 therapists. We have a social worker, I have a licensed clinical social worker, and I have a psychologist. Then I have 2 doctoral interns from the applied psychology department. We are so overwhelmed because of the numbers of middle and high school students with anxiety, depression, suicide ideation, that just last week I had to outsource through Rutgers University Behavioral Health Care, an unanticipated budgetary expense, by the way, because my counselors just can't keep up with the number of kids who need therapy. And mind you, since about 40% of my population already qualifies for subsidized food, lunch and breakfast, there's no way in heck they're going to be able to afford $150 a pop for therapy. And I assume, by the way, that some of these folks only got health care, so they're dependent on the schools. So, so this year, my budget, I'll probably dedicate unanticipated expenses, probably about $18,000 overall, just to outsource additional therapy. I could use the money.
Hi, good evening. Dr. Craig Ostroff, president of Highland Park, and I grew up with responsible gun ownership. And I think arming teachers is absolutely ludicrous, and I'm going to share a couple of stories. I am a former lieutenant commander in the U.S. Public Health Service and congressman during the anthrax attack. I was down on Capitol Hill and working in Washington General, helping their colleagues and their staff, amongst others. And I want to share a few stories. We were concerned about people coming in. I was on the Federal Disaster Medical Access Team and DMAT, and we're a non-combatant team, which usually we bring in people to provide security. But we didn't have security that night because we kind of got called on a Saturday night to come in Sunday morning. And we were concerned about protecting ourselves, people coming in, stealing opiates and being violent. And we decided not to arm ourselves. We figured it was not worth the harm that could come from trained professionals carrying firearms in a moment to protect against a bottle of opiates or a bottle of codeine. So we made that decision. It was the right decision to stay safe because accidents happen amongst trained personnel. I want to mention an event that happened about a month ago, actually, maybe about 3 weeks ago in Israel. You may not be aware that 2 soldiers who were trained best friends, one shot the other, killed him because they were doing gunplay on the barracks, practicing, and they did not realize that the gun was loaded. Thirdly, I know that the NRA frequently uses Israel and Switzerland as examples of responsible gun ownership and responsible wide ownership and use. And one of the things you have to keep in mind in Israel is that there's national conscription or national service. So what happens is that folks are trained professionally for 3 years, and then people are reservists, possibly even up to the age of 50. So it can be recalled almost at a moment's notice. Plus there's war zone. It's very difficult over there. So it's different circumstances. Accidents happen. I just can't imagine how ludicrous it would be to have a kindergarten class with an armed teacher who leaves her purse out or his purse out, and kids get in there. It is, I think we would begin to see more accidents like happened out west, where somebody's gun went off that it was a school security officer. Again, trained personnel make mistakes. I can't imagine what would happen when we have people who take a gun safety class for a week. Let alone when you're faced with an immediate situation at a moment's notice that have to possibly take someone's life. You don't know how you would react. And many, if not most of those people would just retreat anyway.
You know, I would say that, you know, I know the NAACP and me personally, I am not against gun ownership. But I want to see responsible gun ownership, and there's no need, I think, for hunting purposes or target practice or sport. I don't particularly see the need for a weapon of war, which is, in a sense, becomes a toy in the hands of the public. And this is where I think we need to have gun safety take precedence. When they had the Second Amendment, it was to keep King George from retaking the country. You know, but we're not in that kind of position anymore, and I don't want to see a constitutional convention start, you know, eroding these rights. But I do think we need to have some kind of parameters that we put on gun ownership, gun safety, and also with that comes gun traffickers. You have these, you know, traffickers who are being supplied by the manufacturers for more gun sales. I remember when they started marketing guns, these high capacity guns for children, when they started miniaturizing the size, they started putting pastel colors of marketing to women. You know, this is when you have to understand there's a difference between manufacturing a toy or a tool. So I think we really need to be cognizant of what you want a gun for. And a 50 caliber machine gun, I can't conceive of any reason that should be in the hands of the public. So this is where we have to have people like our congressman here, and you got to get your F on your shoulders. I know that's a new thing down. That's a new thing in Washington. They're proudly wearing the Fs or faded, you know, under the NRA. But I definitely would like to see the people support our youth, because this is like, it's getting out of hand. You know, first, I remember when revolvers were the thing. You know, I got a couple of years under my belt, and then it became, you know, let's get these automatic weapons, these automatic pistols, these multi-shot automatic pistols. And I noticed it became more like a toy than a tool. So we have to, you know, let's be a bit more responsible on when we put the hands on each other, because they say it's well-regulated militia. That's why we need these guns. Well, if that's the case, why don't you just not straight have a howitzer in their front yard or hand grenades in their pocket? You know, you have to be kind of reasonable as to what you want the public to have.
Right. So there's responsible ownership. Right. And then there you have to keep in mind, as the congressman, the senator, and the assembly mentioned, there's weapons of war. And if we live with weapons of war, we create the circumstances themselves.
Well, that's part of the point of this video, Veterans for Gun Reform, is the differentiation that you're mentioning exactly.
As everybody in this room knows, it isn't complicated. It's hard, but it isn't complicated. If three items that Congressman Pallone pointed out earlier became the laws of the United States of America, this problem would, to a large extent, no longer exist, and it would in no way, shape, or form infringe on the Second Amendment. If instead of spending how many $1 trillion we're going to spend on a wall between us and Mexico, if we use that money for mental health and for education programs for kids, it would address, this is not complicated stuff. It's just that we have to persevere, we have to stay the course, because as I say, whenever I'm at one of these meetings, historically, this movement loses its energy. It does. And the NRA is staying low, hoping that that is going to happen again. And we just cannot, and I gotta be honest with you, I don't know how it's going to come out. You know, we're all confident that this year is going to be a sweep of the congressional elections, and there's going to be a new breeze blowing in Washington, D.C. What if it doesn't happen? What if it doesn't happen? I lay awake nights thinking about things like that. So all we can do is persevere. And this young woman, I cannot tell you how much I admire her and her companions, because they are leading the way. So often happens in history. The young are leading those for older folks. So keep up the good work. Again, this is not complicated. We don't need to make it complicated. We just have to do what's right. We have to, again, support leaders like this who have the courage to be leading the fight.
Sir, thank you for your comments on not arming teachers. I think that, yeah, we sat down recently with my relatives, my very pro-Trump relatives at a spring retreat, and I successfully convinced them with one comment. Think about where you work, and do you want all of your coworkers armed? They were like, wow.
I saw a sign at a rally that said teachers are scary enough without
It really should only be seen as a smokescreen for the bigger issues. That's all it is. It's okay, put it out there and let them fight this ludicrous, insane idea and completely out of the realm of common sense. They can spend their energy talking about that. Because, wow, I can't even believe we're talking about it. I teach with my heart. My heart is my weapon. Just like every single one of my colleagues, our hearts are our weapons. That's what we use.
Hi, good evening. My name is Wendy Rosen. I'm a parent of 2 graduates of this district. I'm also an educator. And I wanted to bring the safety aspect of this into perspective through a comparison. Cars can be dangerous things when we're not trained to use them and held accountable. And I'm wondering if with regard to the safety effort for gun owners, to use that as a tool to put this in perspective and take the attention away from the fear of losing the right to own a gun to rather, with gun ownership comes a tremendous responsibility, and there should be training involved and licensing and accountability, just as there is for the privilege of driving a car, equated to that same act. And so I just wanted to just mention that as a point of comparison, because it might help put that into perspective for those who are struggling without possibly realizing they're struggling with, the idea of losing their gun rights versus just acquiring the necessary level of responsibility that comes with that. So that's my first comment. My other question is, I'm very concerned about the stress level that kids are under with this simple act of going to school these days. And what they are dealing with is beyond comprehension, it's beyond anything I can could have ever imagined in terms of just how life has become so complicated for our youngest citizens. And I'm wondering how this is being addressed, if there are certain protocols or efforts in place to help kids cope with the fear that they have about just simply going to school these days, which you're reading more and more about. And aside from what they're picking up through the media and just absorbing with such, it's so pervasive, how that impacts their lives and just their very, souls as they have to venture out every day into this world with this new reality.
I would want to say, first of all, that schools should be a safe place, and it should not be a place where people are afraid to go to. But I have some statistics here which are alarming to me. In the last 5 months of 2017, this is according to the Educators School Safety Network, there were 671 bomb or gun threats in American schools, and that's the last 5 months of 2017. In the 6 weeks following the Parkland shooting, there were 763 bomb or gun threats. So this is a real problem, and kids are afraid. I hear about it in my practice, and I guess I'm curious what's happening here. But again, access to mental health services in the schools, out of the schools, Medicaid funding is a real major issue at the state level. But it's a real issue.
I don't have a lot more to say than what I have. I pointed out the extreme levels of anxiety, depression, suicide, and ideation we're seeing. And by the way, we saw anxiety, the uptake of anxiety and depression in kids prior to Parkland as a result of the accountability movement, the pressure to go to a good college, you know, all the things that you can read about the paper testing. That doesn't help. We're heading into it, by the way, so the stress levels are elevated somewhat. But yeah, I mean, we're trying to teach, and yet we're constantly having to play catch up with all of the mental health needs of our kids. And so at the lower grades, we're fortunate in Highland Park that we have a very supportive board of education and a community for the most part when it comes to social emotional skill building and mental health support. So the lower grades, you build community building through something called responsive classroom in all of your classrooms. Kids are spending about a half hour at the beginning of the day before they can start their day talking to each other, learning how to make eye contact with each other, how to empathize with one another. Up at Barnum School, our grades 2 to 5 school, we just reinstituted something that went away years ago called the Barnum Social Emotional Decision Making Lab. Work closely with Maurice Elias and the Applied Psychology Department to identify kids who need to learn how to make better decisions. So we actually pull them out when they're referred for services. We use undergraduate interns at Rutgers to support us. And I go on about all of these things, by the way, we're fortunate to have access to, because of our proximity to a major research university. But what about other schools? What about Parkland? I don't know what the environments are like, but I can't imagine they have a Rutgers in its backyard. So I'm worried, I mean, I'm concerned about our community, but I'm feeling like we are in a decent place. I'm more concerned about people outside of Highland Park.
You guys do like lockdown drills? Well, that in and of itself can be traumatic.
You're right. For public education, the State Department of Education requires school districts to hold 2 drills a month. In the old days, well, 70s and 80s, it was the fire drill, right? You had 2 a month. Now it's a fire drill and either an evacuation drill, a lockdown drill, or a shelter-in-place drill. So think about that. I mean, that's like you pointed out, Dr. Axel, like it's a heavy-duty load of baggage for a kid who's got his or her own issue to be confronting a kid. You deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would agree that it's a lot, like the norm that gun violence has created. However, Highland Park is, speaking as a student, it's a pretty good place. I would argue it's. I've lived in several different places in my life, Seattle, Wisconsin, to name a few, and Highland Park is, because of its size and its closeness, it's definitely developed a really good community and a very nurturing environment. So, at least for in this town, it's probably gone above and beyond in its ability to treat mental health issues, especially with funding allocated. I think I would commend you for like handling that responsibility. Especially, I do agree that there should be more funding for that issue. But speaking for Highland Park, I think it's done a very good job in comparison to other schools of a larger size. There are definitely issues with this, especially as students. I think right now, all of the students in the high school have grown up since the Columbine massacre. in school since that. And that's kind of defined in history as the, not the starting point, but kind of the most noticeable point where we begin to see these mass shootings, especially in schools, happening more and more often. So for us, growing up, it's been a reality, and I know that's kind of difficult to imagine. I would assume that people who haven't lived through that, or at least in school, but for us, it is, and especially with shooting drills, which I'm not saying we shouldn't have, because those are obviously necessary. But it's important to realize that students have had this their entire life. And I think that does contribute to why we're so active, I think, and are demanding change with such power and emphasis.
Andy, I'd like to ask you a question with the shooting drills that you do in school. How serious are those taken? Because I've visited other schools and talked to other students around the state. And in some of the schools, I find they say when they have these shooting drills, the kids go to whatever corner they're supposed to have, the next thing you know, they're on their phones, they're texting, they're playing. And I've heard also the teachers are doing the same thing. How serious is that taken here?
Well, I can't speak for all 500 of the students, but I can give you a general consensus. I think because we live in a really small school, it's, especially since I think the environment in Highland Park kind of creates, it's not always assumed, especially because we have drills a lot, that we're having an active shooter. Obviously, none of us actually think that it's a real situation whenever we go into a drill. But I do think that even though maybe some people don't take it as seriously, I do, unfortunately, we have to do those things, but it does make us more ready and more going about the movements, more natural. But I would hope that we as a nation would be able to come to a place where we don't have to do that anymore. And I think that's why students are demanding this, because they don't want to have to see that happen anymore.
I would argue that if the students are not taking it seriously, that's a defense against how terrifying it really is. It's the only way they can really survive it, is by, hanging out and doing like that. Because otherwise, how could they function?
And educators are faced with creating balance. We don't want to scare the heck out of our kids and have them go home and be fearful. We want them to be prepared, but not to the point. So there's always that, well, of course we expect them to take it seriously. The drills don't last very long. We do prepare them with procedures, and many of the younger kids ask a lot of questions. Well, why would we have a shelter in place? We stay away from the word shooter. We say, well, and this has actually happened. We've had shelters in places because there was a squirrel in the building, and they had to remove the squirrel. And we've had shelter in place because emergency personnel needed to go assist a staff member or a student that was medically ill, and we weren't in the hallways clear so they could get the stretcher through. So we use those examples with the students. The chances of a shooter, very rare. We also do assemblies in the younger levels where we teach them the reason why, and the example is kind of funny. We have 3 kids run around, and we say, now, what would it be like if we never did a fire drill? Because they think fire drills are boring. Well, if we never did a fire drill, there'd be 500 students and teachers running around going, oh my gosh, what's that bell? And we act it out, we role play. And they see the purpose, like, oh, okay, yeah, we want it to be normal. It's sad that we have to add lockdown, evacuation, shelter in place, shooter drills. That's very sad. But we do want a certain amount of normalcy, definitely not fooling around, but a certain amount of normalcy so they're not terrified, but they're also prepared. And if there is any inkling when it actually is not a drill and there is a true shelter in place or occasional evacuation, they get real serious real fast. It's definitely, they Kids have a way of knowing. It would be very interesting for us to hear from older students that have moved through our school what their perception was of the drills in the younger, I see one of those students right now, in the younger grades, and how they felt when that was happening, and maybe gather some data so we could do it better. That would be great.
Hi, I'm Alea. I'm currently a junior here at the high school. And speaking of Highland Park, is it true that starting on Monday we're going to have a security guard at the high school?
No, not starting on Monday. There's been some talk about having what we would probably call be a youth development liaison, somebody, but not a security guard. And that wouldn't happen until after we work with the community. This is my moment, I guess, to advertise it. Next Tuesday nights, the 24th, forum will be about that, and Officer Cavella's role in the school. So for those in the community who might want to come out and take part in giving us work, we're going to focus specifically on school safety, 6:30 in the high school cafeteria at on Tuesday the 24th. So hope that clarifies that. What is rumors?
Okay, if no one else has any questions from the audience, I have something I want to say, and then I'm going to ask each of our panelists to make their final remarks. But the thing I really want to say is I had the privilege of attending or witnessing the school's walkout in March. And Avery and I were just talking about it a few minutes ago. Somebody on the panel said, well, you know, these shootings have happened before and there's a fervor and then it dies down. It's because of you students all over the country who are rising. I think this time it's different.
Yeah.
And, you know, someone said to you before, tell us what to do. I don't want to put that much pressure on you guys, but know when you need us there, we will be there. And in Highland Park, I can't speak for any other community, we have been working with Karen and her team. And by the way, Karen, you can advertise for volunteers whenever you like, against gun violence for quite some time now. So I want to thank you, Avery, Dr. Taylor, I was going to say Kim, but Ms. Green, for everything you are doing with our students here in Highland Park. And if there are any Highland Park parents here tonight, I want to thank you for the values that you've been instilling in your children. Thank you. Okay, folks, it's getting towards the hour when we need to vacate, so if you wouldn't mind making your last remarks, and I'm going to start again with Shanti, and we'll work our way around.
No, all I'll say is you know, board of teachers and freeholders, when they were having student walkouts, a number of us fanned out across the county. I wasn't able to be here in Highland Park. I was in Metuchen, there were people in East Brunswick, in Monroe, for Danwood, all over, and I just really hope to see this continue because actually a couple of us were talking about trying to get student leaders from each of the towns to come together and form like maybe a county-wide group. We don't want to be in the business of telling you guys what to do, but just put you in touch with each other because it would be amazing if all of these incredible students in Middlesex County came forward and you know, really led the movement here in New Jersey. I saw some amazing people. We were ready to be like, well, here's my seat on the freeholder board because some of them were so articulate and so passionate. And I'm sure, you know, the congressman will tell you, all of you are amazing, and I just hope to see more good coming out of this.
I want to thank our panelists for being here. We need to listen to our kids. As adults, we're very good at talking. When you have something to say, insert yourself. Continue to insert yourself. Continue to demand that there is action on the legislative level We have some great legislators right here. We need to hold everyone accountable, and we need funding. That's a common request, but we need funding. We need funding for this really three-pronged issue. And thank you to our listeners for supporting some sort of, for really listening to all of the conversations, dissecting it, and understanding that we need some sort of gun-safety measures to put in place when we hold people accountable and our society accountable. Our kids are on the front line. Your educators are on the front lines of this. And we're scared, but we will persist.
This was a really terrific evening. I just got to say the stars in the night are twin angry. And you here in Highland Park are really, really have a lot to be proud of. I was thinking in my mind, cause and effect. Great teachers, great students that is that by mistake. So congratulations, thank you. Keep up the good work. Don't let them see you sweat.
I agree with Pat that this is another great opportunity to hear from everyone. Thank the mayor and council. I wanted to say one thing though that Nancy brought up. Nancy, I didn't mention it, but it's actually in my committee when we talked about the research and the prohibition on research on gun violence, called the Dickey Amendment. Some people were confused because in the spending bill that we passed a few weeks ago for the whole year, the fiscal year, there was language that said that that the federal government and health and human services could do research on gun violence, and some people interpreted that that was a turnabout, and it was at some level because it eliminated the prohibition, but there was no money for it. Okay, so it was really a little bit of a trick because they said, oh, the Dickey Amendment doesn't exist anymore, so we're not providing any funding. So without the funding, a line item for funding, there still is no research. It's sort of an absurd thing. And I do think that, part of the problem is that when you talk about what causes gun violence, mental illness, opioids, which, of course, Santi and I made the point that shouldn't be the focus. But the problem is we really don't know because we can't do research, right? And if there's no federal dollars, sure, the state can do it. Sure, the private sector can do it, but you take a place like Rutgers, which I represent, and have so many people involved with Rutgers and Highland Park, very little research is done that's not federally funded, in real terms. So if you don't reverse that and provide the funding, it's not going to happen. And then, one of the reasons the NRA historically supported the Dickey Amendment is when they fund research because they don't want the facts. They're denial, right? So, they can say, well, most of these problems result from mental health because there's no research to say the opposite, or very little. So I think that's an important thing too. I didn't mention it because I don't mention that, but I think it is an important thing that we have federal research, and I don't want anybody to assume that we're going to because we have no reason we're not.
I just want to thank everybody for being here, and students and the community. I want you to know NAACP is here to support you, and particularly the students. We're here to support you. We're not here to tell you what to do. If you need some help maybe organizing or how to do things, we just reach out and we will follow your lead, because you guys are our future, and I've learned from the civil rights movement, the children have moved this along, all along. In Birmingham, when they were trying to get the right to vote, there was the kids that was climbing out the schoolhouse windows that led that march. So that's why, understand we're here for you, and the mayor, I want to thank you very much for putting this together. Thank the panelists for showing up. I learned a few things here tonight, so it was a good night for me. Because anytime I walk away learning something, it's a great thing. But really, I'm learning from you, Kim, what y'all doing in the schools is fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to continue to work to fight this issue with every power that I have. And Charlie, I agree with you. We can help get the kids together and create a vehicle. Let's do it because they're all super. A lot of great kids went to Washington when we went to Washington, and the county Democratic Party actually provided buses to go, so we're going to continue to work on that. And I commend the mayor and the council and the schools for doing such a great job in Highland Park, and we'll continue to support you on anything we can, so thank you. And thanks to the parents again, too, as you said.
You know, as the coordinator that I thought on me that when I go to my superintendent roundtables, a lot of my colleagues complain about the local legislatures. I won't call out the specific people, but it dawned on me that I'm really, and I mean this with all sincerity, I am blessed to have you guys. I really am. Yes. Congressman Pallone and I've been in my schools, I've only been here 2.5 years. I feel like I've seen you a lot, and you do trust and support it. So I put a bone on my heart. I really do. Thank you. I really appreciate you guys.
All right. We keep dreaming we didn't graduate yet.
So, yeah, what Representative Pallone said about the research funding is so important, but the fact is, I think we already know, we already have a lot of research. We know the issue is access to guns. I'm just going to tell you real quick, there was a study done, this goes back a few years, but so I think one of the things that drives gun rights and the NRA is fear, and there's this mythology about protection, like you get it done for protection, but it's a myth, and we already know that. So this study found that for every case of self-protection homicide involving a firearm kept in the home, there were 1.3 accidents, 4.6 criminal homicides, and 37 suicides involving firearms. So really, the idea that you own a gun for self-protection is a myth. I think we really need to address that, and we really know a lot already about the problem. The problem is access to guns. Of course, we have more research will be more current, and we can get a finer view of it. But I just want to repeat and affirm the appreciation to Avery and all your compatriots, and put at least as much as I can do, the resources of psychological science are here at your disposal.
Okay, so my last word is vote. We're hoping for a change because it's going to be critical. We're very fortunate to have, as was mentioned, the legislators that we do have. But in order to make the changes in our country that need to be changes, we need to vote. We also need more volunteers in the rating campaign. So if anybody, the kids are great and I love the kids, but we need to be there to help them. We need to do our part. We are also accountable.
I know a lot of people send me for my work and ask me what the students, especially the youth movement, could use. And I think the resounding call right now is legislation. And that's not to say that your work is invaluable. I think people from the Brady campaign and others have definitely been key in fighting for this, but I think right now we need to focus on real legislative action. So I think this needs to really target gun access, I think. Like you said, we have a lot of research, and I think it's not so much about figuring out what we need to target, but start taking action against it. And I do recognize that both of the representatives here have done that already. Not so much targeting you, but other representatives of other districts and even other states. I think also going back to what Shani said a couple minutes ago about partisanship, I definitely do believe in that we need to have a more bipartisan stance on this issue. I did recognize and I do believe in changing the wording, especially when talking to members of the NRA and people who are feeling more protective of their guns. I think that taking sort of a standoffish stance or an extreme stance can scare those type of people away, and it drives partisanship between parties, and that's what thwarts change. And so I think while some of the actions by the NRA are despicable, and we can't always get 100% the legislation that we want, I think that, you know, halfway is better than nothing. And right now, I would hope we get more progress and years, but I think I speak for all students when saying that we would appreciate any legislative action by now. And so I definitely thank you both for working towards this. But living in Highland Park, it's definitely, it often feels very partisan, and more towards the liberals, because this is a town where political discussion isn't always as open. I know we praise ourselves for being diverse and having being very politically active, but conservative voices aren't always as valued, and that's coming from a Democrat here. But when we don't allow the other side to talk, we don't allow change, because realistically, we have a House and a Senate that's made up of both Republicans and Democrats. So when you're making change, I definitely believe that Mr. Pallone, you need to be doing what you're doing and changing the way we talk